of Niger Delta and facility in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. I'm Grace from the Center for Peace Studies, University of Tromsø, Norway. And my focus here is trying to see the gaps in the Greek hypothesis, which so far has been popularized by most World Bank researchers, namely for Collier, who is now at Seoul University, and Kaufland. Essentially, the Greek hypothesis talks about is basically the economic narratives of conflict. Talking about that the drive, onset and duration of conflict is basically motivation for economic gains by the rulers. That is the non-state actors in conflict in a given state, particularly in a given state. But in some cases, it has not always been the case, and that is what drove me to try to dig more into into resource-rich states conflict where available. Now, from Nigeria particularly, particularly in Niger Delta, we've had since the discovery of oil in 1956, we've had consistent conflict in the country, in the Niger Delta region. In the beginning, it was very peaceful. In 1966 particularly, it was a bit violent with violent confrontation with organized by the Niger Delta volunteer force led by Jacoboro against the federal government. It was basically a 12-day revolution which was pushed by the federal government in Nigeria. And subsequently, we've had, of course, numerous peaceful protests to redress the injustice done to the people of Niger Delta by the oil companies. Of course, we've had Shell, domiciled in Netherlands, operating in Niger Delta. It's an oil company. We've had Chevron also. We have AGI. We have numerous big oil companies operating in the region. And the idea of adopting more ethical measures, perhaps to explore or in the exploration of oil, was supposed to be done, but most times, perhaps for a reason I don't know, they've tried to adopt all unethical measures in the exploration of oil. Destroyed environment, first of all, the land, which to an extent was the source of livelihood of the people of Niger Delta, the water, which essentially is sufficient. Also, one of the areas in Niger Delta people use particularly of iron ore. And numerous attempts by the Niger people to ask for redress for the injustice done to them has met the report. And from the beginning of, from 2000 particularly, the youths becoming too frustrated, becoming too discontent with what is going on in the region, decided to take to more open confrontation to challenge not just the oil companies, but the Nigerian government, insisting that we have the resources in our land. We have been educated to an extent. We have acquired skilled, talent that could be employed by this oil company. Yet, we are always pushed aside when it comes to employment. The idea of local content of employing by oil companies was never really established. Most times, what we have is expatriates working in Niger Delta, where we have youths jobless in the street, not doing anything. Yet, you have people perhaps from various parts of Western Europe, and they come to the region to work. So the people took to arms, and from 2006 precisely, men, which so far have remained the most sophisticated militant group in the region, emerged. And that's, with the emergence of men, the more violent competition with the Nigerian government began. Now, there has been this argument that men so far is being motivated by the economic gains of the conflict. That, of course, they are involved in stealing the oil, what we normally call oil bunkering in our country. They've been involved in kidnapping for ransom, kidnap oil workers, and then ask for ransom, then release them. Then, of course, get involved with some other forms of economic sabotage, like oil facilities vandalization. But the question is, I was there last year for 2 months for my research. I interviewed at least 12 men militant youths. And I tried to pose a question to them. I mean, you guys are more mainly motivated by gains, what you gain from bunkering in Nigerian oil. Are you more, I mean, you're asking for development, you're asking for employment, but it seems through your method of resistance doesn't speak volume of a group that really wants some form of development, some form of empowerment. Rather, it speaks to greed. Now, then, I was like, let me just read some of the comments most of the militant group and most of the militants which I interviewed with. For example, when I asked them about if they were so much, if one of their reasons has been that they have been so much excluded from government, one of them said is that I quote, that this is the height of government rascality. You are taking our resources. No sign of government presence here in terms of political leadership, in terms of representation. And under your watchful eyes, oil companies are destroying our environment. Our farms are water, and we're getting poorer by the day. And when we complain, you send your soldiers to kill us. And when we then fight back, our communities are finding it wrong. Then they ask a question, which is a kind of rhetorical question. Is this a government or what? This is why we won't stop. We continue to challenge them, referring to government and oil companies, to free ourselves from this bondage. Now, they are saying what the governments are, they are seeing what transnational oil companies and government doing as being, they are seeing it as they are being caged by these two actors. And again, there is another fundamental issue which has not been addressed effectively. I'm trying to state why who, to an extent, should move away from purely economic consideration. Why talking about natural resource conflict correlations? Why there is a need for more research, need for more deeply and see if there are rooted grievances for any conflict. Now, another problem was obnoxious degrees and minority question, which has been a fundamental issue in the Niger Delta. In 1978, Nigeria made a decree, the Land Use Act, which monopolized all land in Nigeria and vested ownership of the government. And in 1969 also, there was this Petroleum Act that vested ownership of mineral oil resources in the land and federal government. This, to an extent, usurps ownership of resources from the people. And of course, when these laws were made, there was an attempt to also initiate policies to bring about development for the youth. But these things were not met. Now, this is what another militant, one of my informants told me. Most of you said cannot forget in the prayer. This is what another one said. They said it was because it was the military era. Talking about, for example, the Petroleum Act was made under the military era. Even the 1978, even the Land Use Act still was made under the military era. They said it was because in the military era, things will be different this time. What is the difference? What is the person you're referring to our government, our president between 1999 and 2007? What did Obasanjo do than to send joint military patrols to kill us? Those are even the thieves, not us. They not only killed us, but at the same time connived with us to steal the oil. Even our brother that is now referring to the current president, that is now there, what has done for his people? Anyone that gets to the seat of power will forget the promise he made before getting there and get drunk with power. Then he just says something which I also added in my thesis. Nonsense. They are speaking from the idea of frustration, the idea of hopelessness, feeling that we have been so marginalized by the government, feeling that we've not only been denied economic opportunities, but we have also been denied political representation in the government. And this fact does not necessarily speak to great hypothesis. Rather, it speaks to more rooted grievances. That is because of the confrontation, not necessarily the great hypothesis as Collier and most economic narrative scholars would want us to believe. There's also a question of subjective levels of poverty and the crisis of injustice. This factor I'm enumerating here simply speaks to grievances, more of grievances as fundamental causes of conflict, not necessarily great causes as Collier wants us to believe. Of course, if you see in the slide, the great hypothesis was argued in three forms: financing of rebels, meaning that illegal appropriation of natural resources, that rebels lay their hands on natural resources illegally, grab the resources, sell them to finance the conflict. In other words, since they keep holding, since they keep having access to natural resources, conflict will not end. Meaning that natural resources, the drive for conflict in first place is to grab natural resources. The continuation of that conflict may imply that the rebels must keep having access to that same natural resources, otherwise the conflict will easily come to an end. Of course, there was also another element, the recruitment, which is a recruitment opportunity in this fighting made possible by structural effects. This is the only factor to analyze that got close to the grievance hypothesis, meaning that unemployed due to frustration, due to hopelessness, in the midst of plenty, what mean in the midst of plenty, not just being jobless, but also being, you are seeing, you have the resources in your land, you have the resources in your land, and there's this feeling that yes, we are not employed, and you are telling us to just keep holding on. For how long? Fair on for since 1956. This is 2013. Men's group are still kidnapping, and if you ask any of them, what is your motivation for kidnapping? What's the motivation? But the answer is always because we don't have jobs. If you don't have jobs, how I have to kidnap? The answer is because that is the only way we have to capture not just the international attention to understand our plight in the region, but also to perhaps speak to these oil companies to act. Now, you ask them why bunkering oil? What they always say is, of course, what they've told me during my research with them was, we don't just bunker oil. We have even people in the government who are with us in this game. We have politicians that support this say we have to. It's like a conspiracy between the militant groups, the political elites, the oil company employees. All these parties are involved in oil bunkering, not just the militant group. But if you read through Greek hypothesis very well, Collier and Hoffler essentially blame the rebel group for any conflict, excluding the government, seeing the government as being predated upon. But both the government and the rebel groups are all predators. So my argument was not just the economic gains comes with the method of resistance, but essentially what are the problems and what gave rise to the conflict are the structural injustice well rooted in the Nile Delta. The question of unemployment, the question of devastation of the environment, the question of destruction of the environment, unemployment, a political exclusion, what they call marginalization. These are things that have caused so much grievances among the youth that it is time we just take to arms. And when they took to arms, they felt the only way they can be had is to get involved in some method of resistance that speaks to economic gains. Talking about oil bunkering, talking about kidnapping for ransom, talking about oil facility capitalization. But these are not the fundamental factors that gave rise to the rise of the militant groups to challenge the state. It is much more than that. The economic consideration has aftermath of, or better still, one of the gains of the conflict. And these are youths in their prime who have been denied economic opportunities. There must be a way there must be something to do to live up to their responsibility, to their own self, to their immediate family, and perhaps their extended family. So something has to be done to keep living up to it. They have to do something to keep living up to their responsibilities. But in conclusion, why I'm not necessarily disputing the economic consideration. I'm saying the economic narratives of conflict has been too reductionist. Adopting such simplistic, perhaps very realistic way to interpret conflict in resource-rich states does not speak well of the fundamental causes of conflict, particularly in a given resource-rich state. There's the need to adopt more integrative approach to interpreting conflict, rather than saying, hey, it is just economic consideration. Country specifics, for example, has to be taken into consideration. Different countries have different reasons for going to conflict. And most conflicts in the first place doesn't just start with the economic, doesn't just have the economic undertones. The Cote d'Ivoire, for example, that is rich in cocoa, one of the causes of the I will run up now. One of the causes of conflict there is a cynical exploitation of ethnicity. It would have, in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, we would have what is called full-blooded Ivorians, and we have what we call immigrant Ivorians. These caused a lot of conflict in the region. In places like Colombia also, there was much even before the rise of, before the explosion of cocaine, there was more fundamental reasons why Colombia has the conflict, much before the issue of cocaine and drug came. So there is need for more integrative measures, particularly among the academic cycles, while trying to interpret conflicts. Taking up different countries, you're going to say empirical studies, take up 40 countries or 5 countries or 20 countries and then make a general statement on resource-rich conflict relations does not really speak completely to the causes of conflict in resource-rich states.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 minutes for questions. Yeah.
I have a question looking at your method of resistance and your conversation with the people that represented last year in Niger Delta. You were mentioning that you were talking about the reasons for why they were doing what they were doing. There have also been court cases actually taking the oil companies to court for the environmental damage. Did the people you talk to have any opinions on actually using different means of putting their aims forward than those of violence? Were there any thoughts that you could anything about that?
Yeah, of course. While I was talking, I made mention of, first of all, adopting the most useful measures to be had. But the idea of violent confrontation with the government became more pronounced rather with the emergence of the democratic government in Nigeria in 1999. Because there was this argument that said it was basically because Nigeria has been under military rule since 1960 we had our independence. And of course, military rule implies brutality, implies repressive measures, implies so many things that doesn't speak to tenets of democracy. Now there was this hope that with the emergence of democracy, that all problems in the Delta will be solved. But it's like when the emergence of democracy, it became worse. It was that same, in 1999 we had our democracy, that a community was completely bombed by a civilian president, killing about 2,000 people. I mean, leveled a whole community. That is a democratic state. So the so many communities, so many individuals, like Ken Saro-Wiwa that was killed in 1995. He's an environmentalist from Niger Delta. He was killed in 1995 by the military junta in Nigeria. The son took up the case, and eventually, for a long time, it went on and on in the US. And he won the case, and Shell paid millions of dollars rather. So the family, of course, the family channeled the money back to developing Ogoni community. There was also recently some cases that have been tackled in Netherlands that has been won by few individuals. But then, we are not talking about individuals, we're talking about a whole region being devastated. Most of the youth there don't necessarily believe that why they believe in the rule of law, they call as, of course, the arbiter of justice. They still believe that, we have been so pushed to the world. That was some of that means to tell the whole world our plight. Like the issue of kidnapping as one of the methods of resistance, it's not most of the kidnappers that were apart from those few that are killed, most of them are released without any ransom. But the most important thing is that they've been hurt. Why they've been hurt? The problem in the region has been exposed by that new kidnapping. It's sometimes just to publicize their plight, not necessarily because they want money. I think the only thing that have really given the militants money is the oil bunkering. And that's because of the involvement of other actors. Not necessarily. Militants cannot connive with international buyers to steal oil. There must be some well-influential elites in the society, which they really confirm. Some oil company employees, conniving with them to make that possible. So,
okay, we'll need to cut it there. We're already going into the next speaker's time.